Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're really going to dive deep into the comparison of wearable analytics, wearable data, wearable technology. It's the biggest craze out there. We've got your Whoop bands, we've got your Oura rings, we've got your heart rate straps, we've got your Polars, we've got your Garmins, we've got your Fitbits, we've got your Apple Watches. It goes on and on and on. But what works, what doesn't? There's so many opinions out there. And it's worth it to really take a step backwards and look at what the science is telling us. People that have actually deduced this against the most important and scientific gold standards in the industry, and then be able to make decisions. Hey, is this something that I want to be making decisions off of or not? And so that's what we're really going to use today, and what we're really going to dive deep into, and really utilize a lot of another one of my colleagues, my friends, the Quantified Scientist. If you go to his YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of his work that he's done for his PhD in creating a lot of the scientific aspects, and because he has access to a lot of these tools. So we're going to get a deep behind the scenes aspect that not a lot of people have, where quite often we just hear a lot of reviews based off like, hey, I like this, I didn't like this is my opinion. But everything we do, and you know what we do at Own It, it's all quantifiable based. It's all numbers driven, because if we can quantify it, we can measure it, we can manage it, and we can ultimately improve it. So with that being said, let's dive in here. Make sure you like this. Make sure you subscribe to the page. Make sure you comment on it. I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. If you have more questions or you want to know more, put a question down there and I'll answer it. And I'll make sure that I engage with you guys and we get going here. So the first one we want to dive into is that Whoop band. And the big thing we need to know is that it is a PPG-based measurement. So photopolysonography, it allows us to pull information through that little guy underneath and really gets the information going. So I'm just going to show what we look for on the Whoop band and what they're measuring. So they've got their own algorithm called strain. And that's based off of how long our heart rate stays in different zones. So it's max heart rate, calories burned, and average heart rate for the day. That's what it's typically pulling up and looking at. We're going to take a look at whether that is really accurate or not. Then we have recovery. And recovery is an algorithm of their proprietary nature based upon HRV, sleep, and resting heart rate. And that's given to us on a daily basis. And then we have sleep performance, which takes a look at our total sleep, so total sleep time, as well as the quality of that sleep, broken up into the phases: light sleep, REM sleep, slow wave sleep, and a wake cycle. If I open this up, it'll show you that wake cycle there as well. So those are the things that Whoop is actually looking at. Now, the key thing here that we need to understand is that Whoop is just a simple measurement tool. It's not something that's actually saying whether it's perfect or anything in terms of actually grabbing the data and information. So that's why we used what we see here, which is that ECG or the EEG, pardon me. And it now actually is the gold standard in measuring how we are sleeping. So if we take a look and compare the two, we actually start to see that one is obviously worn on the head and the other is on the wrist. The only way to truly get true, and the reason why it's gold standard, is because it's actually measuring our brainwave pattern. And as we see here, the patterning, if we take a look at these little red areas right here, these are where the EEG is measuring our REM sleep. Now that REM sleep, we can see here that we are coming out of. So if we take a look, REM sleep's always at the end of a cycle. So if we said this was one cycle, this was 2 cycles, 3, 4, 5, we're saying there's 6 cycles in this sleep, okay? The quality of the sleep, what's great about this is the quantity of sleep, really, really great between the EEG and the Whoop band. It shows when we're going to sleep and when we're waking up. It's almost literally to the T, both literally just shy of 9 hours and a half. Okay, really, really high quantity and quality in measuring the quantity of sleep. Now, when it comes to taking a look at the overall measurement of sleep, we can see it's slightly off. And I'm going to give a better example of that here, where we actually come and take a look and we start to see that, hey, the deep sleep in that measurement was 14% measured on the EEG versus 21%. So it's overestimated. Whereas our light sleep on the Whoop band was underestimated in terms of the actual amount of sleep. Same thing with our REM sleep, overestimated in our Whoop band, underestimate or versus the EEG, and then overestimated in the wake cycle again. And so basically what we're learning here is that if we look at the quality of sleep, right, our deep sleep and our REM sleep is what measures accuracy of quality of sleep. It's about 35% spent in that time versus, call it 54%. So they're overestimating by about 20%. So if we're actually going to start putting numbers to this and wanting to look at the type of sleep we're getting, we're really just going to want to use Whoop to identify the quantity of sleep and not necessarily quality. Okay, something that we should really kind of dive into and hold very true to us. Now, when we're looking at the measurement of heart rate, now this is going to come into the place of our strain score. We can take a look and see that when we're spinning, when we're doing running, when we're doing the elliptical, when we're doing a spin class, a Peloton class, anything that is repetitive in nature, something that's going to keep our heart rate elevated for a longer period of time, where there's not a lot of ups and downs, it's actually very accurate. And I've got a couple here to show you. So you can see on this one, and then you can also see on another example right here, where they are all very accurate in nature. We're seeing that the alignment between the Polar H10, which is that chest strap monitor, which again is the gold standard, is very good compared to the Whoop. Conversely, when we're doing a lot of intensity work where it's going up and down and up and down, so more of like a weightlifting session or a high intensity interval training session or a sprint session, it doesn't pick it up as quickly. Because remember, again, when we're using a heart rate monitor, we're actually getting the firing of the SA node in the body. So there is no way that we can get it from the wrist, because what we're actually measuring here is pulse rate versus heart rate from the chest strap. And so anytime we're seeing this highly divisible, highly interval heart rate, we are going to want to really pull from a chest strap rather than sheerly from the Whoop band. So again, if we're wanting to look at overall heart rate from a wearable device in terms of the Whoop band, we may not want to necessarily hold true to the heart rate that we're getting in interval-based work. In longer duration-based work, extremely accurate, extremely good, and extremely powerful in that nature. Now, the other metric I want to make clear here, guys, which is super important to know and understand, is when it comes to HRV. And HRV is, again, it's a measure of heart rate. And knowing that at lower intensities, when we're not moving, that the Whoop strap is really, really strong, we can conclude that our HRV measurement is also extremely strong. So when using your Whoop band, the big thing you want to know is that the sleep, measuring quantity of sleep, extremely accurate, but we're going to want to put a little more thought into the quality of sleep that we're getting, knowing that it's not 100% there. When it comes to heart rate, making sure that we utilize some really strong metrics in understanding that when we're doing interval-based work, not going to be as accurate for us, but when we're doing longer duration work, really, really strong, and it's going to pull some quality data in that we can use in a powerful way. And then knowing that the measure we're getting of HRV is extremely accurate. So there's going to be a little bit of discrepancy between the information you're getting and using their algorithms to identify things, but rather the raw data and knowing HRV and understanding overall time of sleep and then your steady state exercise, a real powerful tool. Now, again, coming back into the Oura ring, when we take a look at this, obviously it's a ring, circular, really easy to wear, very uninhibiting, except when we're working out. The big thing that we want to know here is that it doesn't actually take live heart rate. It's very different than a lot of the other wearables that say they take live heart rate and are accurate to certain levels of degrees. But what it does really, really well is it pulls heart rate all the time and is able to create these estimates. Let me actually share the dashboard with you so we can actually take a look at what it measures across the board. So just similar to Whoop and some of the other wearables, they measure sleep, sleep quality by that matter, which is taking a look at, again, REM, deep, wake cycles, and light sleep, and break them down into phases. And then by taking a look at putting it into your latency, your restfulness, the efficiency of your sleep, and creating a sleep score at the end of the day. It also then takes a look at your activity, which is how long were you active? How long did you have an elevated heart rate? Like I said, it doesn't produce it for you live, but it is continually recording it and allowing us to know how our movement is actually coming and where our intensities lie outside of the norms. And then it gives us an overall readiness score, which is based, again, on an algorithm based upon sleep, your body temperature, resting heart rate, HRV, and really bringing some of these measures in that bring it into a really accurate number that's unique. And so I want to get into, hey, how accurate is this data? Again, how well can we trust it? And should we be using it to make decisions? So if we come and take a look, and we take a look at the EEG again. So remember, we have our friend, the Quantified Scientist. Again, check out his Instagram page as well as his YouTube page, really diving deep into this, using his EEG. So using it on his head along with the Oura Ring and comparing these sleep stages. So if we take a look, again, real accurate, almost to 100% of when do we fall asleep and when do we wake up. And notice that the waves in terms of measuring the sleep stages are a little bit more accurate than what we saw with Whoop. And so what we can say and what we can conclude is that the sleep stages of REM, light, deep sleep, and wake cycles are more accurate with Oura, still not 100%, but they're more accurate in actually measuring the stages that we're getting into. They are a little light on the overall REM sleep. They're not getting the quality that we need there. So again, the numbers that you see from these wearable devices, use them with extreme caution. Don't be all worried if you're not getting the amount of REM or the amount of slow wave or the amount of deep sleep that you're hoping, or that you're spending too much time in a light sleep stage. Be more concerned with the quantity of sleep. It's a really great measure there, but use everything else as kind of like a real rough gauge and an outline. Now, when we come into the heart rate aspects, so if we take a look at HRV, which is truly what we want to know, is how effective is the measurement of HRV? And we take a look at this graph, we start to see that it is actually really close to this trend line. It was almost bang on. And compare the Oura HRV versus the Polar H10 HRV, which again is the gold standard because it's actually measuring the firing of that SA node. Now, in using this, it can give us real understanding and real solidarity in the fact that the information we get from it is quality and something that we should be utilizing. Now, when we look at this last informational page on heart rate, we can see again that at lower heart rates, so it was just measured at lower heart rates, not a higher interval base, that we actually are almost exactly on point. And so at higher intensities and at lower intensities, we are going to see a better, more quantifiable range that's acceptable based upon the Polar H10 and Oura Ring comparison of heart rate. But also let's remember that the Oura Ring does not show heart rate live. So it might be something, again, not something that we can use to actually measure intensities during, but something that gives us a good quality version using after. So with the Oura Ring, really good for HRV measurement, extremely good for HRV measurement actually, is nice when we're wanting to just see our overarching and look of intensities of exercise, because it's not going to show it to us live. And then from a sleep standpoint, it is more accurate than some of the other wearables out there, but still real high quality for quantity of sleep, but there's still some rough areas when it comes to quality. Now, really diving into the Apple Watch, and I know everybody has one. It's one of the most popular ones out there. It's the first kind of integration into a holistic, everyday use of our phone, which we're recording on that phone. Otherwise, I'd show you. But how good is it really? And so I was really excited when we started to see this data to be able to kind of come back to and say, hey, something that we should actually be thinking about. So when we take a look at our sleep data here, we really notice that, again, really good for identifying beginning and end times, but actually horrendous when it comes to measuring the actual sleep stages. You can notice that it doesn't measure anything in the middle. It's just like, are we sleeping or are we awake? Are we sleeping or are we awake? There's no measurement of light sleep, REM sleep, deep sleep. In between there, it's, are you sleeping or are you not? And so that's something to really be aware of, and a limitation of the Apple Watch in itself when measuring sleep. Now, again, if we're just wanting to measure quantity of overall sleep, then it's excellent to be able to be done. Now, when utilized from a workout setting, this is actually amazing. It's one of the best PPG measurements of heart rate outside of that heart rate strap. So when compared to the Polar H10, you can see here in a conditioning stage where we're doing longer duration at higher intensities, absolutely outstanding. Like it literally cannot be better. It literally falls right on top of one another. And then when we go into a weightlifting session or something that's a little bit more interval based, you see that it is, again, extremely accurate. If you've watched this whole video so far, you've seen what Apple Watch and Oura look like in this case from the wrist setting, and they're nowhere near this. And so it's really, really strong correlations through this. So if we're going to utilize the Apple Watch, we are going to want to make sure, again, that we're using it for HRV, we're using it for heart rate, we're using it to measure exercise intensities. But if we're truly looking for a sleep measure, we're going to want to have to pair it with another wearable in and of itself. Now, coming over to our next one is Fitbit. And Fitbit's really taken the world by storm after its acquisition by Google, and really kind of being one of the first ones on the market, to be honest with you. And the first thing I want to show is the way in which it measures heart rate when in comparison to some of the Polar H10s. And if we take a look here, we can actually see that it's not too bad in terms of accuracy, but again, versus the Apple Watch Series 6, which we've found to be the best PPG measurement, you can see the difference. So you see how outside of this line, there's not as many black dots, but out here, it's a little more scattered. That basically tells us that there's a differentiator. There's more outliers than there is in this one. You want it to be really heavily overlined in black over top of that line, because that means that they're almost speaking the exact same language. So we know right off the bat that the Fitbit has the capability to measure heart rate accurately, but not quite the accuracy that some of the better ones do. And so when we actually compared it in the work that we did, you can see again that when it came to the weightlifting sessions and those really intermittent bouts of exercise, again, it was not able to react as quickly. You can see that the curves are generally as close, but they're not getting near the intensity that we need to because of the quick changes in the heartbeats and the heart rate that's occurring at those high levels. But again, if we're going to be using it for something that's more steady state and regular duration, it's going to be something that's fairly accurate, something that we can use and going to get accurate numbers. So again, utilizing Fitbit, it's not something we want to do to say, hey, this is going to be how everything should be. Take it for its word. We're going to want to be a little bit careful with the quality of data that we're seeing from it. And there are definitely other tools, other utilizations that can make it, that can give us better data. Now, the same thing comes when we take a look at the Garmin. And I know Garmin has been the world class for a long time in heart rate measurements and utilizing its wrist units for triathlon, track and field, but it's always paired with a heart rate strap. And heart rate strap, they are unprecedented, just like Polar is. They are world-class, gold standard. But what we're going to find really quickly here is that their PPG sensor is not as great as some of the other ones that we've experienced. Now, if I compare it again back to that Apple Watch, we see again at higher intensities, it starts to have this dropping, and we see that there's a lot underneath. So it's actually going to underestimate what our heart rate's at and where we're working. So that's something that we really got to be aware of. You see all the black down here versus being overestimated. So we really have to be aware of that when we're using the Garmin in a way in which is not facilitated in that without a heart rate strap. So same thing here. We see it with a weightlifting session. We see that there is that massive discrepancy versus when we go back into this steady state and something that's a little bit more regular, we see that the curve matches nicely. And if we've started to see a trend here, there's very few, only the Apple Watch so far has done a really, really, really good job of using a heart rate sensor on our wrist to measure change in heavy interval work, such as a weightlifting session, such as sport, or such as a high intensity interval bout. Here's another look at the Garmin in sport, and we can again see the same thing happen where it's kind of in and about, having a difficult time picking up those high intensity bouts paired with those lower intensity recoveries in between. So if we come back and we can again make a conclusion here, when we're wanting to choose a wearable to measure our HRV, measure our heart rate in exercise, measure our sleep and the quality versus quantity, we're not necessarily going to want to rely solely on the Garmin wrist unit. But if we pair it with a heart rate strap, it's going to be something that can really give us some quality information. Now, coming into our last one, certainly not least, but Polar. And Polar has forever been a name in heart rate monitoring, wearable technology. Quite frankly, it's what we've compared everything to in the Polar H10s for the gold standard. And so what we're going to look at here is the Polar Vantage, and it's their new wrist unit, extremely powerful, can do a lot of great things, but we wanted to see and take a look at what it does from our sleep, HRV, heart rate standpoint. Now, if we take a look at what it does from a sleep standpoint, it's actually really quite accurate. And I know we showed this earlier on with both Oura and Whoop, how they both were able to get some form of sleep data, be able to understand the highs and lows, the different cycles from the REM sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, and so does the Vantage. Now, is it as accurate as what we would like it to be? No, it's not 100%, but if we take a look at the overarching numbers, it's actually really, really adequate. So it actually is better than what we saw from Whoop. It's better than what we saw from Oura in estimation. So it actually got almost bang on for our deep sleep. It was a little underestimated on the light. It was almost bang on in the REM cycle, but a little overestimated in the awake phase. Now, that could have been because of extra movement or whatever it may be. But what's important to know is that this is a real quality tool for measuring the amount of sleep and the quality sleep in which we are getting. Now, with that being said, we now take a look at what it looks like from an exercise standpoint. And when we see the exercise standpoint in the heart rate, we see that it's actually, again, not too bad in identifying the heart rate. And you can see, again, it still sprays a little bit around. It's not near what the Apple Watch is when measuring strictly heart rate, but it still has the ability to be fairly accurate if given time. So now if we actually compare it to our heart rate and we take a look at in a long form and long duration again, we can see that again, it's bang on. It's again, following that Polar H10, basically two products exactly the same, one on your wrist, one on your chest, measuring almost identical. There's a little bit of discrepancy, but again, very, very little. Now, when we come in and we take a look at our accuracy from a intermittent bout standpoint, we can see that there is, again, more discrepancy, not getting to the peaks in which it needs to, and is unable to respond as quickly. So that's something to, again, keep in mind when using the polars, that it's great for sleep, but not quite so great, again, unless we're using that heart rate strap and heart rate monitor. So again, kind of looking at all of these together, we can come to a conclusion that there's not one that is really, really good at absolutely everything. We have to understand what we're looking for. Now, every single one that I just mentioned, Polar, Garmin, Fitbit, Apple, Oura, Whoop, extremely, extremely good at measuring HRV. Why? Because we come back to those baselines of understanding that at low intensities, when there's little variation in heart rate, they're really accurate at picking that up. So any single one can be really accurate and really good for measuring HRV. You know how much of a fan I am of HRV and how important of a tool it is. Just make sure that that can be paired with an app or something else that pulls that data in and can be analyzed at a high level of integrity. Two is, if we are looking for a wearable that is going to be most accurate in pulling heart rate information without a strap, the Apple Watch wins. Straight up, if we're going to be doing some type of activity on a bike or doing some weightlifting session, the Apple Watch is actually really good if we're just wanting to use it off of the wrist. But what we have to know is that it's a very expensive tool, and if it gets broken, it's a bill that I necessarily wouldn't want to be paying. So in looking at that, both your Oura Ring and your Whoop Band can actually be really great if we are not doing, not wanting it live. Obviously, Whoop has the live option over Oura. But again, the two are still missing out on some of those high intensity bouts when you're getting up to those higher heart rates and then dropping them right away, especially in weightlifting sessions. And then when it comes to sleep, Oura, Apple Watch, Whoop, really, really want to use those for quantity of sleep. Amazing for our tracking quantity of sleep. But if we want the most accurate quality, we're going to want to go with that Polar Vantage. So make sure you guys subscribe here. Make sure you guys like, make sure you guys comment. Ask me any questions that you want regarding these, because these tools, although they're expensive, can really help us make quality decisions down the road as we're wanting to impart and improve our health and really get some metrics that we can take hard, actionable action on that will produce the results we're looking for. Until next time, guys, stay healthy, stay strong, and go own it.